So I just want to say I'm very excited to be here. I'd come up with this idea to do a writing workshop for people with chronic diseases before Cure CMD. Um, I've been lucky enough to take some really great writing workshops through Zoetrope and Catapult, um, and they've really helped me kind of make myself a better writer and kind of hone in on what kind of writer that I want to be. So a few housekeeping items. I want this to be informative, but also conversation. Don't feel like you have to speak or share. We're all here to learn together. Writing workshops should be collaborative efforts because what makes writers is sharing what we write with other people and getting their opinions. So I definitely want this to be a safe space to talk about, hopefully, our shared interest in writing. So since this is a small group, if you feel comfortable, I'd just like to go around, maybe introduce yourselves, let me know why you're here, what interests you in the workshop, and just kind of gauge like what you're, if you're a beginner writer, if you've been writing for a while, just let me know. So let's start with Sarah.
Hi, I just wanted to join the conversation, and I can't say I'm much of a writer, but I have collected some stories, short stories that I used on an online platform where I wrote one story a week about my life, and then I published it into a hardcover book for my family. So anyway, I'm just really interested in learning more. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else like to go? Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, so I'm Stephanie. Sorry if I didn't hear anyone before. I just noticed my audio was off, but I'm here now. So I'm not a writer at all, but I would like to write blogs because I like sharing my story, but I would like to do that in writing. Just because it feels like a diary, you know, but I'd like to share it with whoever would read it. So any help I could learn would be great. And I'd like to hear what you guys write as well. You know, read what you guys write as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Courtney, you want to go? I'm going to pick on you since I know you.
Hello. So I am not a writer, but I'll write when I find that it's necessary. I've written blogs before and other things, and people seem to like it. So I figure, it's never too old or too young or too anything to not be able to take advantage of practice.
Excellent. You know, Courtney, that's actually a great point. You're never too old to start writing. So don't ever feel like you're starting too late. You know, Toni Morrison, she didn't even get published until she was 40. And Maya Angelou didn't get published until she was in her late 40s. So it's never too late. Anyone else want to go?
I think I can say hello.
Hello.
My name is Keith. I wouldn't call myself a writer, but it's sort of something we all do. So like I think we're all writers, just in all the things that we work on. And then, do you want to say hi?
Hi.
Welcome. We're glad to have you.
And this is Asher. He's a writer because he's in school, so he has to be a writer.
Kind of has to.
Right. A reader, a super reader.
Well, actually, that is a great point as well. Readers often make the best writers. And sometimes we just read for fun, but as a writer, you know, you really want to kind of analyze what you're reading because you want to see how the story is taking place, what the point of view is, what the plot is, how the characters are developed, the dialogue.
I kind of figure out what's going to happen before it happens.
You know, sometimes that happens. You know, an author tries to not make their book so transparent or what they're writing, but sometimes it definitely happens. So why write? I know people will say, I've got something to say or I've got a story to tell. But I really want people to focus on what makes your point of view different. Picture yourself in a huge room with thousands of writers. What will differentiate you between those other writers? We also write because it's therapeutic. So people with chronic illnesses, it's very important because it's something that kind of helps us get our feelings across. Something I'm going to talk about is spoon theory. Have anyone ever heard of it? So the term was coined in 2003 by Christine Sorrentino. She's someone with a chronic illness. She has lupus, and she was trying to explain how she feels on a daily basis to her friend. And so she used proverbial spoons, and each spoon represents a physical and mental energy it takes to complete a daily task. So smaller tasks like showering or getting dressed may cost only 1 spoon, while larger tasks like cooking or vacuuming, it may take 3 or 4 spoons. So on days with increased fatigue or pain, even smaller tasks may require multiple spoons. So people have to be economical in how they spread their use of spoons throughout their daily activity. And she uses spoons because it's kind of a utilitarian thing that we use on a daily basis. So what happens when we're all out of energy? We have these days where we want to write and it's easy for us, but some days you're just all spent and you just don't have any energy. And that's when I use something called flow of consciousness. So on these days when you're just tired and you don't feel like doing much, just write words, write emotions, write feelings, write tiny bits of sentences. It doesn't have to be a paragraph, doesn't have to be anything that makes sense. And then on a day where you do feel great, go back and look at these words, these sentences. Maybe you can construct something from it. It's just kind of a glimpse on an easy glimpse of how you felt during that day. So that's why I want to include spoon theory. I think it's important. So there's one universal secret. So if there's one thing you take away today, writing is about telling the truth. We are a species that needs and wants to understand who we are. You should not be afraid to bare your soul to the world. Be confident in what you want to say. Don't be afraid to get real and honest about what it means to live your life. Lay out all your secrets and things that may embarrass us as humans. If you're familiar with the Magic School Bus, Miss Frizzle said, take chances, make mistakes, get messy, because the magic of writing is actually in the mess. That's what makes people interested in your writing. They want to be able to connect with you on that human basis. And I guaranteed you're going to sit at your desk and get frustrated. Telling the truth is about as easy and pleasurable as, well, getting your teeth cleaned, and that's not fun at all. So you're going to have those moments where you're going to be frustrated, and you just have to keep doing it, because I know it sounds trite to say, but writing does actually make practice makes perfect. So let's go into the mechanics of where to begin, like with the elements of fiction. So first, of course, you've got to have the plot. This is the action element in fiction. It's the arrangement of events that make up a story. Many fictional plots turn on a conflict or struggle between opposing forces, and this is something that's usually resolved by the end of the story. Typical fiction plots begin with an exposition, which kind of provides you like a background information, kind of needed to make sense of the action. It describes the setting, and it kind of introduces the major characters. And then these plots develop into a series of like complications or intensifications of the conflict, and that leads to a crisis or a moment of great tension. And then, of course, the conflict may reach a climax or turning point. That's when the greatest tension that happened in the story kind of fixes the outcome, and then the action falls off as the plot is all sorted out and resolved. But one thing you should be aware of, in the 20th century literature and more current literature, things aren't so black and white when it comes to plot. People don't normally follow this set linear structure. People are kind of being more creative with how they view plot and how they structure it. So once you have a plot, then comes the characters. Very important. In fiction, they can be conveniently classified as major and minor, static and dynamic. A major character is an important figure at the center of the story's action. The major character is also called a protagonist, whose conflict with the antagonist may spark the story's conflict. And then supporting the major characters are one or more secondary or minor characters, and they just kind of work to illuminate the major characters. And minor characters are usually static or unchanging. They kind of remain the same from the beginning to the end. And the dynamic characters, on the other hand, they kind of exhibit some kind of change or attitude or purpose or behavior as the story progresses. A well thought out character will make or break your story. Readers need to be able to connect with your characters. However, characters don't have to be likable. Like I'm sure you've read a book where you love to hate a character. Happens all the time. And it still makes you want to read the story. And I think that's important. But you just have to make sure that your characters are believable. People have to be able to connect with it in some sort of way, whether it's in positive, negative, something that moves the plot along, something that will keep your reader engaged about what you're writing. So once you have the characters, dialogue, very important. It's the speech of fiction. It's the talking between two or more characters. Bad dialogue works against fiction because the writer or reader, they have a contract that kind of says the reader will believe the unbelievable as long as the writer does nothing to shatter that belief, that does nothing to inject the real world into the imaginary one. Dialogue is one of the key elements of fiction. Without it, there's no story. If the dialogue is really bad, no one's probably going to read the story. And if it's only moderately bad, you might find readers, but they really won't compare the story to their favorites because you really want them to like, hey, why did I like this book or this short story versus something else I've read? And then if it does a great job, then the story has a chance to be great, to be read and really remembered. So setting, it's the physical and social context in which the action of the story occurs. The major elements are time, the place, and the social environment that frames the characters. These elements kind of establish the world in which the characters act. Sometimes the setting is like the sketch, presented only because the story has to take place somewhere and at some time. Often, however, the setting is more important, giving the reader the feel of the people who move through it. Setting can be used to evoke a mood or atmosphere, and that kind of prepares the reader for what's to come. And then you always want to have some kind of theme. It's the central idea or meaning of a story. Theme in fiction is rarely presented at all. It's very abstract from the details of the characters and the action that composes the story. It kind of provides a unifying point around which the plot, the characters, the setting, the point of view, the symbols, and all the elements of the story are organized. So you want to be to distinguish theme plots. So the story sequence of actions from subject and what the story is like generally about. So next is narration. Narration just means the art of storytelling. And the purpose of narration is to tell stories. And anytime you tell a story to a friend or family, that's narration. It's about an event or act or incident in your life. That's engaging in a form of narration. In addition, the narrative can be factual or fictional. Factual story is based on it tries to be faithful to the actual events as they unfolded. Fictional story is made up or imagined. The writer of a fictional story can create characters and events as he or she sees fit. And then there's also can be linear versus non-linear storytelling. So linear storytelling, you're telling the events as they happened in the order they happened. Non-linear is you're telling this story, but out of order of the events that took place. You'll see a lot of non-linear storytelling nowadays. People try not to be linear. Publishers are looking for something that sets you apart from other writers. It's very big. A lot of short story collections are kind of hard to sell to publishers. So nowadays, people are creating short stories where each short story is separate, but they all relate back to one major plot line. And that makes something more marketable to publishers. So yeah, just what is going to set you apart. And then something that is extremely important, and I cannot stress this enough, show, don't tell. I want to say that again. Show, don't tell. When you tell rather than show, you inform your reader of information rather than allowing them to deduce anything. So you're supplying information by simply stating it. You might report that a character is tall, or angry, or cold, or tired. That's telling. So you want to show. Well, how do you do that? If your character is tall, your reader can deduce. I just knew it would cut me off when I was on a roll. So yes, showing rather than telling. When you show rather than tell, you make the reader a part of your experience. Rather than having everything simply imparted, the reader's going to get bored. So, and then they can come to the conclusions that you want, without making them get there by telling them what's happening. So show and tell, very important. It's kind of a controversial now because some better atmosphere for when you're writing. So next up, point of view, very important. It refers to who tells a story and how it's told. The possible ways of telling a story, many, vast, and more than one point of view can be worked into a single story. However, various points of view that storytellers can draw upon can be grounded into like two kind of broad categories. There's third person narrator, and that uses pronouns like he, she, or they. And then that goes into omniscient. So the narrator is all knowing. It takes the reader inside the character's thoughts, feelings, and motives, as well as shows what the characters say and do. There's also limited omniscient. So the narrator takes the reader inside one, or at very most, a few of the characters, but neither the reader nor the character has access to the inner lives of the characters in the story. And then there's first person narrator. So that's, of course, using the pronoun I. The narrator presents the point of view of only one character's consciousness, which kind of limits the character to what the first person narrator knows. But I think it's very important if you're writing a mystery, you don't want to give all the pieces of the story all at once. So you probably don't want to use an omniscient point of view, probably want to use the first person I, might work better. So whatever moves the plot of your story along, because that point of view of your character is going to be very important to the plot, the theme. So you always want to think about that before you start writing. And then lastly, tone. It's the storyteller's implicit attitude towards the reader, the subject, the people, the places, the events. The tone could be characterized as serious, ironic, sad or happy, angry or affectionate, bitter or nostalgic. But you just want to make sure that your tone is in line with the characters, the plots, because everything needs to make sense. So next up, I want to talk about personal narratives. Now, personal narratives they kind of share some of the same elements as fiction. They're based on real life experiences. They should have significant meaning for the writer. The experience may have resulted in the writer gaining insight or learning a lesson. The writer narrates or tells a story to describe the person's experience. It's written in the first person point of view, so the I perspective. Personal narratives, like I said, essentially contain the same elements as fiction. Personal narratives have they're more narrow, clearly defined focus. The writer will focus on usually just one central idea or theme or message. And then the central idea communicates to the reader a sense of that experience and its significance, which is important for chronic disease because you want people to know what it's like to live your life on a daily basis. And I think that's something that's very important. So just some guidelines for personal narratives. Write your personal narrative as a story. Write as if you were telling your story to a friend or family member. So as a story, it must include an introduction, characters, plot, setting, climax, and conclusion. Another way to approach that is just by structuring with an introduction, body, and a conclusion. The introduction should set the tone. The body should focus on the key points you want to get across. And the conclusion can tell the reader what lessons you've learned from the story. It's up to you how you want to structure it. There's a lot of leeway with personal narratives. You want to give your narrative a clear purpose. It should reflect your unique perspective on life. This is, it's a lot harder than it sounds. You need to establish your perspective, the key things you want your reader to take away, your tone and your voice. It's a good idea to have a set purpose in mind for the narrative before you start writing. And of course, once again, show, don't tell. Very important. So use I, but don't overuse it. You, the author, should take ownership of the story. So the first person pronoun I is used throughout. However, you don't want to overuse it because you don't want to make it sound too self-centered or redundant. So how do you avoid this? The simple answer is turn your sentences around so that the I isn't the subject. So, for example, instead of I worked on designs and blueprints for building a rocket ship, say a favorite project was designing blueprints for building a rocket ship. Just turn around the subject and the I. It works. Pay attention to tenses because tense is the key to understanding. Don't switch between the present and the past because it just doesn't make sense. And you want to make this helps separate out current events from the narrating voice and the past self who you are narrating. You want to write in, if you write in the present tense, you want to make sure you keep it consistent throughout. And of course, make your conclusion satisfying. Satisfy your readers by giving them something unforgettable. This closing scene has to be memorable because it's what kind of closes everything that you've written about previously and just wraps it up nice and neat. It doesn't have to be something incredible or shocking, just something that helps give an interesting take on your story. So now that we have all these elements, where do we find inspiration? Well, you could use newspapers because if you read the newspaper, there's a lot of crazy things that are happening now in the world. You can do overheard conversations, make it work. You could take a walk. You could look at pictures or paintings, meaningful life events. There's poetry, childhood memories, dreams and daydreams. And then something that a lot of authors are doing nowadays is looking at Greek, Roman, and Norse mythology. So there's people that are taking stories from mythology and they're writing them in present day. So they're trying to keep those same elements from that story, but then write as if it's more memorable and people can more identify with it in this current period. So let's talk about some common problems you may see in writing. One common problem is nothing happens. You've given a lot of lovely detailed descriptions about things, but nothing actually happens. Or there's too many things to focus on and people get lost in the story. There's no sense of cohesion. So that's something you definitely want to be mindful of. So too many things happening can be a little dramatic. You try to cram way too much material into a short space and things kind of feel rushed. Remember, you don't have to have things like car chases and bombs and dragons and international spies and murder in order for the story to be exciting. Small moments to focus on emotion or everyday life can be just as fascinating. You definitely want to include some surprises. Now, by that, I don't mean you have to have like dramatic twists. I mean, you just want to avoid a story that is too predictable and obvious, like Ash was saying earlier. You don't want your reader to be able to see what's going to happen in the story before it happens. So definitely want to have some surprises. You definitely want to use filtering language. If you're using the first person I, you don't have to say I saw, I thought. Look, this is what I was talking about earlier. Just state the action without the I. So instead of saying I saw the door was closed, you can just say door was closed. You'd also want to make sure your ending isn't too sudden or abrupt or just completely out of left field. If you're tired, then and you stop writing wherever you are, or your story takes a sudden turn, just because you don't know how to end it, that's not good because the reader is going to lose interest. You also want to make sure that you're not using too many adjectives and adverbs. Cut most of them, use adverbs sparingly, be ruthless, as I always like to say. I don't know if we're going to have time to actually write something today, but I do want to focus on something That's very important. So, and feel free to share if you want. What makes you interested in reading a personal narrative or a short story or a book?
For me personally, I like to try to relate.
Excellent. Anyone else?
For me, it's because I have to know what's gonna happen. And I get stuck watching a lot of bad movies because of this. Did you have something?
Wait, what did you say?
So what makes you want to read a book? What makes you want to read a short story? What gets you interested in it?
Depends. It depends on if it's fantasy.
Okay. So it may be a genre you want to read. What if you don't know anything about the book? You've just read the blurb. How do you know if you really want to read it or not?
What's it called?
It could be anything. So for me, what I do is I always read the first sentence. If your introduction gets me, then I will want to read it. Those first few sentences can make or break your story. It is what's going to get that reader hooked. It gives a reader just a bit of glimpse.
You shouldn't go right into the fighting, otherwise it's just too confusing. It's not like it's
Exactly. So you want to give a reader just enough, a little bit of glimpse into what your short story or your novel might be about. So I want to play a little game. This is going to be good for all you readers out there.
Oh, that's why you should do what, like an exciting part and say earlier.
Yeah, jump right into the action and then you're like, okay, let's back up. Like, let's talk about how did I get here? And then you go back like a week earlier or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Linear versus nonlinear. Yes, very important. So I'm going to give you some first sentences of famous novels. And I want to see if you can identify the book from the first line, because it's very important. Because hopefully, if these authors have done their jobs, then these books are memorable and you'll know them just from the first line. Everyone ready? Thumbs up. All right. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight from the darkness of the movie house, I had only two things on my mind: Paul Newman and a ride home. Does that sound familiar to anyone? No guesses? So that's actually from The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. That's actually the first line from The Outsiders. Let's see here. This is my favorite book in all the world, though I have never read it. They actually turned this into a movie, a very quotable movie. That's actually the first line from The Princess Bride by William Goldman. Let's see here. If you are interested in stories with happy endings, you would be better off reading some other book. Sarah, do you know?
Is that from The Hobbit?
No. So,
That's for
not only is there no happy ending, there's no happy beginning, and very few happy things in the middle. They turned this into a series on Netflix.
Check the chat.
I don't know.
Yes, very good, Courtney. It is a series of unfortunate events by the Lemony Snicket. Good job, Courtney. Let's see here. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation. His dreams mocked by death to time. This is something we all have to read in high school. Any guesses? So this is actually Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. First sentence kind of gets you hooked. Let's see here. I hope I will be able one day to confide everything to you, as I have never been able to confide in anyone, and I hope you will be a great source of comfort and support. This is probably one of the best-selling books besides the Bible. Probably one of the most read books. Any guesses? I think it is second to the Bible in terms of publishing. So this is actually the Diary of Anne Frank. Yeah, this first sentence from Diary of Anne Frank. Okay, last one, and I think this will be an easy one. Once there were 4 children whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. The story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of the air raids. Sound familiar to anyone?
Narnia.
Yes, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. Good job. So just an example of how a first sentence, this introduction, very important, glimpse into what you're writing, just hooks the reader. So when you're writing, just think about that. Now, don't overly concern yourself with the first sentence because, of course, the whole work is important, but it's definitely something just to keep in mind. So where does that leave us? So let me give you some parting advice. Never, ever compare yourself with other writers. It's never helped anyone. Everyone at some point will have self-doubt with what they're writing. When you get a book, you're getting the final product. All great writers have crappy first drafts. It's just the way it is. This is how writers end up with good second drafts and terrific third drafts. How to write, find what works for you. What environments is good for you. If it's at a desk, if it's on the couch, if it's outside, whatever makes you comfortable, whatever you think is going to make you more comfortable when you're writing. It's very important. So write often, write poorly, analyze the crappy stuff, share what you write, do it when you're ready, but always work on getting better. Because as writers, that's something we always want to strive for. And then when you're ready, let someone read it, because that's very important. Because writing should be a collaborative effort.
What do you want to say?
So I have good stories, but I never write them down on paper.
So do you keep a journal? Do you keep like an idea book? So that's what I would recommend for you. Just take a notebook and start writing down ideas.
An idea book.
Yeah, exactly. Brainstorm. That's the great thing about writing. Brainstorm any idea you have. It may not turn out to something, but you never want to forget a great idea.
I'm not good at writing what people tell me to write.
You know, I had the same experience when I was in school. It was much easier doing something that I wanted to write about, not what I was being told. So that's actually a great point. So does anyone have anything that they're working on right now? So I do want to remind everyone the Cure CMD Creative Contest is going on. The deadline is tomorrow. If you haven't submitted something, submit it. If you want my email address, I can give it to you. If you want advice outside of this workshop, I'm happy to critique, analyze anything. Avery and Kelly know how to get in touch with me. I'm actually, in fact, I will put it in the chat for everyone if you want to email me. I'm happy to give whatever advice I can. I'm no professional. I'm still working on getting published myself, but I can share with you what I know, what might help you. Yeah.
So, wait, let me see.
Any questions? So I really want to thank everyone for joining me today. I'm hoping this is something that we will continue in the future. I would enjoy that very much because it will hopefully make me not only a better writer, but everyone else a better writer, and also hopefully this presentation will get better in the future. So yeah. So everyone has my email. Thanks everyone for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Have a great evening. Please feel free to email me. I always check my email. Happy to read whatever.
Can I ask one quick question?
Of course, yes, definitely.
Is there future plans? Any more of these type of things, or?
I'm happy to do one. If you have interest, let Kelly and Avery know. And yeah, I'm happy to do another one in the future.
Cool.
Super interested. I can talk it over with Avery and Kelly as well.
Yeah, if anyone has any programming ideas that they'd love to see from Cure CMD, we're happy to try to make that happen. So if you're like, hey, we'd love to see more writing, more creative stuff, like we're definitely open to any ideas and try to make that happen for you guys.
Cool. Is there any like avenues we're missing? Like, is there any like Discord servers or like Facebook groups? Kind of like, is there any CMD places like that? Like,
Yeah, so we do have a main Cure CMD Facebook group, just like a support group. It is private. There's just a few questions that you have to answer before you get accepted. But yeah, we have a main Facebook group as well as subtype specific groups. So depending on what CMD affiliation you are, there's also other subtype groups. We don't have a Discord. That is something we've talked about doing. We're just trying to gauge, I guess, more interest if there was, it's more of a server that I know is gaining more popularity. But yeah, we're definitely open to any ideas that you see as far as connecting with others. So
normally when there's writing workshops, there's just like fiction 1, fiction 2. They're kind of separated into different categories. So I kind of crammed everything I could into this short time. So I apologize for that. Hopefully you got something out of it. I'm very happy if you did. There again, please email me if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. I'm always checking it. So yeah, here if you need me.
Cool.
Great. Thanks everyone. I really enjoyed. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye everyone.
Have a good night.